I never expected anything to change. My name is Elena, and I am a 34-year-old mum with 2 kids and a husband named Mark. My life was simple and busy. I spent my days juggling work, running errands, cooking dinner, and making sure the kids did their homework. Mark was always busy too, but he'd managed to help out where he could. It was a bit of a circus at times, but it worked. I loved my life just the way it was. Chaotic but familiar, comfortable. Then, one day, Mark did something that would turn everything upside down. It was a random Tuesday evening when he walked through the front door, looking like he was holding a big secret. I was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce, and the kids were arguing in the living room. "What's up?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. He smiled wide. "I have a surprise for you," I raised an eyebrow. "A surprise? What is it this time?" "You'll see," he said, grinning even more. "Close your eyes." "Mark, come on, I'm making dinner," I laughed. But he was insistent, so I rolled my eyes and shut them. When I opened them again, there was a leash in his hand, and on the other end of it was the sweetest, most energetic little golden retriever puppy I'd ever seen. My heart just melted. Mark chuckled at my reaction. "I know you've been wanting a dog for a while, so I thought we'd finally get one." I was speechless for a moment, my hands still holding onto the wooden spoon. "A dog? For real?" I asked. He nodded. "Yep, he's ours. Meet Max." Max was tiny, probably only a few months old, with golden fur so soft that I could hardly resist reaching down to pet him. His tail was wagging like crazy, and he immediately trotted over to me, looking up at me with big brown eyes that seemed to say, "I'm here to be your best friend." I bent down to scoop him up. The moment I held him, I knew this was exactly what our family needed. He was just what I had imagined, a playful, loving little guy who would be our companion through thick and thin. I couldn't stop smiling as he licked my face, and the kids ran over, eager to meet him. It was the beginning of something wonderful. I could feel it. For weeks, life felt brighter with Max around. He brought so much joy into the house. The kids loved him, and Mark would joke that he was already part of the family. "Max is going to be our 3rd child," he'd say with a grin. And in many ways, Max was just that, a family member who followed me everywhere, who greeted me at the door after a long day, who curled up beside me at night. I found myself spending more time with Max than anyone else. Whether it was going for walks in the park or sitting on the porch, talking to him while he sat at my feet, it was as if he understood everything I said. He'd listen quietly, his eyes steady, never judging. I'd tell him about my day, my stresses and my worries. Sometimes it felt like he knew exactly what I needed to hear. He didn't need words, he just needed to be there. But then, one afternoon, things started to change. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where nothing much happens. The kids were playing in the yard, Mark was fixing a leaky faucet, and I was inside catching up on some laundry. But after a while I realised I hadn't seen Max. Normally he'd be curled up on the couch with me or playing outside with the kids, but he was nowhere to be found. "Max?" I called out, walking through the house, checking the rooms. No answer. I frowned, a little nervous now. It wasn't like him to just disappear. I decided to step outside. The backyard was calm, with a few trees swaying in the breeze. I noticed the wooden doghouse Mark had built for Max over by the oak tree. Max loved that doghouse. It was his little haven. I walked over, calling his name again, but there was still no response. "Max, where are you?" I called, but nothing. I crouched down and peeked inside the doghouse. The space was small, but it was the perfect spot for Max to rest. But when I couldn't see him, I felt a little panic rise. "Max!" I tried again, my voice a little more desperate this time. That's when I realised I was stuck. I had leaned too far in, trying to get a better look, and somehow my body got caught halfway inside the doghouse. My legs were still outside, but my upper body was trapped. It wasn't even that big of a space, but my clothes were starting to feel damp from the morning rain, and I couldn't figure out how to pull myself out. I let out a nervous laugh. "Great, Elena, really great," I muttered to myself. And then I felt it, Max's presence. I felt his little paws on the grass behind me, and I knew immediately that he had come back. I turned, hoping he could help me, but instead, Max trotted right up to me, tail wagging like crazy. He had no idea I was stuck. His excitement filled the air as he nudged against me. It was like he couldn't wait to play. I tried to call to him, "Max, stop! I need help!" But he didn't listen. He just kept nudging me, a little too excited for my taste. And then, without any warning, he jumped up and started to hump me from behind. I froze. I don't know how to explain it, but in that moment I felt a wave of confusion. A strange, uncomfortable feeling washed over me. It wasn't anything Max had done on purpose. He was just a dog being playful, but something about it felt so wrong, like a line had been crossed. When I finally managed to pull myself out of the doghouse, I stood up quickly, heart racing. Max was sitting there looking up at me with his innocent eyes as if nothing had happened. He was wagging his tail like it was the best moment of his life. But I wasn't the same. I felt different. I felt wrong. For days after that, I couldn't look at Max the same way. I couldn't explain why, but there was a distance now between us. He still followed me around, still curled up beside me at night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and confusion. Mark noticed. "Are you okay? You've been distant lately," he asked one evening, looking at me with concern. But how could I explain what I was feeling? How could I tell him about the strange, uncomfortable moment with Max when I didn't even understand it myself? I tried to push through it, keeping up with the daily routine. I went to work, made the meals, helped the kids with their homework. But inside, I was lost. Max's joyful face only made me feel worse. How could I look at him the same way when I felt so confused and guilty? One evening, as the kids played inside, I sat on the porch looking out at the setting sun. Max came over and laid his head in my lap, just like he always did. I absent-mindedly stroked his fur, lost in thought, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of everything seemed to lift, just a little. I let the tears come, quietly. They weren't loud sobs, just a gentle release of all the confusion and guilt I had been holding inside. Max stayed by my side, his warmth grounding me. In that moment, I realized that I couldn't keep carrying the weight of what had happened. Maybe I would never fully understand it, but I couldn't let it ruin everything. As I sat there, I knew one thing for sure: Max was still my friend. He had never judged me. It was time to forgive myself and let go of the guilt.